Situated right on the equator, Kenya is blessed with nature's unique gifts almost beyond comparison anywhere in this fascinating world of ours. From the inland capital city of Nairobi, it is a 6-hour drive or an hour's flight to the luxurious ocean resort of Mombasa. Light cotton clothing is advisable, and don't leave the mosquito sprays at home.
Kenya, the West's favourite country in East Africa, the one they don't want to go the same way as Sudan, Ethiopia and Somalia, if only to protect those safari and Mombasa beach club trades. Late last year, the West stopped aid worth $800 million in an attempt to force President Daniel Arap Moi to call elections, and a novelty in Kenya, despite 28 years of independence, to allow opposition parties to take part. Until the end of the Cold War, Kenya's Western backers turned a blind eye to corruption, human rights abuses and the inevitable one-party rule. But now the West have moved the goalposts. And sensing a new mood, a handful of journalists in Kenya have been publishing stories about corruption in high places. Lots of stories and lots of corruption. Moi's men don't like it, and they've struck back. From Nairobi, Ed Harriman reports.
I think the press in this country is freer than many other parts of the world. But I must say that from our own point of view, our press has become extremely irresponsible. They write a lot of things which are based on rumors, lies, character assassinating some leaders in this country, particularly the ruling party KANU, and the public of Kenya.
The publication the Kenyan government most hates is this one, the weekly magazine, Society.
The system is not used to truth, so whenever we try to publish what is supposed to be the truth, the system gets annoyed about it, and they get scared. Police came and confiscated or impounded 30,000 Society magazines. And we stayed out of circulation for nearly 2 months. We've been arrested several times. Me and my wife, 5 journalists, and we were taken about 500 kilometers away from Nairobi, and we have courts in Nairobi. We were taken to court in Mombasa. The idea was actually to ground this magazine.
What have you been charged with?
We've all been charged with 11 counts of sedition.
We always run the risk of police raids. Just a month ago, they just marched in, 20 armed policemen, ordered my staff to get everything relating to Society and carry it upstairs to their waiting Land Rovers. They didn't produce any court order or any legal warrant in support of their action. They just took it.
Do you think there's press freedom in Kenya?
It's getting there.
Getting there?
The authorities say there is. I think there is more now than there was before. And I think that's as a result of magazines and publishers like Nyamura with Society having the courage to continue.
We've had people coming to tell us how police have mistreated them in police cells, and we publish it. And it is, I think it is the first time in Kenya that at least the media now, particularly our magazine, is exposing these kind of things. We've done a story on licenses being for importation of sugar given to people who were close to President Moi. We've done stories about land allocation, which we felt that it was allocated to very influential people and very close to Moi also.
But Society too has friends in high places. How important has the American ambassador been for the expansion of press freedom in this country?
Oh, I think very instrumental indeed. He's been determined to push it through. And he's shown people, really, in public, through the media, that he's going to stand by his aims. And I think a lot of people have taken courage, a lot of publishers here have taken courage from his stance and been more outspoken.
So you encourage the opposition to the government here?
I don't encourage the opposition, I encourage democracy in the democratic process.
And that includes the encouragement of a press which carries corruption stories week after week?
I suppose that's so.
You can be comfortable with that?
I'm more comfortable with the stories than I am with the fact of the corruption. I lived out here in the early 60s, and in those days Kenya was an honest country, it was an honest society. And to see it develop corruption as a high art form is saddening. And it's also very deleterious to the development of the country.
The American ambassador has been very, very encouraging, particularly to the local people, because the fear which Kenyans used to have that we cannot talk is not there now. The American ambassador told the Kenya government, and Moi in particular, that he has to improve the human rights record in Kenya. And without that, he will not continue getting aid from the U.S. And whenever we've, particularly in society, got into trouble, the Americans have talked. The ambassador himself has sometimes protested, sometimes quietly, sometimes through the media, and that has helped us quite a great deal.
What about the British High Commission?
Oh, those ones have been very, very bad. The British seem to be supporting the government which is suppressing us. We don't know where the British stand at the moment.
That's deliberate policy. The British High Commissioner in Kenya is Sir Roger Tomkis. He says he prefers quiet diplomacy, and so he didn't want to take part in this film.
Their attitude is very much one of what they call behind-the-scenes diplomacy, which perhaps could be more interpreted as behind a cup of tea diplomacy. I think that there's a risk they run in their refusal to come forward and declare publicly their stand. They run the risk of being seen as complicit in violations to, democratic principles. Either that, or they'll just be seen as sitting on the fence, asleep on the fence. When the Nyamoras were arrested and charged with sedition, I recall the Americans making a public statement very quickly. To the best of my memory, the Germans also condemned the action, but I do not recall the British raising their voice at all on the issue, which I find mildly depressing.
What do you think of the attitude taken by the American ambassador here? Do you feel that's an appropriate role for an ambassador to take?
To us, it is not. And I think the public of Kenya has been very bitter against the American ambassador here for appearing to be siding with the opposition parties in this country.
What is your view of the role that the British High Commission has taken?
As far as we are concerned, the British High Commission here in Nairobi has been very understanding, has not appeared to be taking sides. In any case, the High Commissioner has not come out and criticized KANU or the government for anything to do with the press.
The seen in Nairobi now. Sir John Johnson, we've just seen your ex-house there, because you were High Commissioner in Kenya from 86 to 1990 and a District Commissioner, I know, for many years before that, and you were, of course, a close acquaintance of President Moi. Just a word on style there. The suggestion is that the British are playing both ends. I mean, they're all for this backing democracy thing, but they're complicit with the government?
No, I think that's nonsense, really. I mean, the pity about that film was it was really a little one-sided. We had the American ambassador, we had...
Well, here you are, and you were there,
I would like to just say that there is a difference. There is a difference of style, yes. Smith Hemstone, of course, is a journalist. He is undoubtedly enjoying the pleasure of being in Nairobi, which he likes. And he particularly, I think, sees himself as a different sort of ambassador from the norm. I would hate to rubbish Smithy because he's a very nice man.
But the norm is somebody who, up until last year, did turn a blind eye to corruption, to human rights abuses, and accepted autocracy. I mean, President Moi could be forgiven for being a bit bewildered that suddenly Britain seems to be on the other side line.
I don't think any question that Britain is on the other side. The fact is now that donor countries, and by that we mean mainly the Western countries, have solidarity about the need to see human rights taken into account, to see proper use of aid taken into account, and the British government has made that very clear.
But they haven't made it very clear, have they? Not as clear as the American government
Well, not as clear as on that film, but the fact is that that film was actually, as it were, slanting towards this particular issue. But where the British government have come forward very strongly is on the need for proper accountable government, and indeed that is what I hope Kenya is working towards, a multi-party government after the running up to the election, and a free choice at the elections, free and fair, and seen to be free and fair.
Rakia Omar, let me bring you in. You're director of Africa Watch, which monitors human rights right across the African continent. Now, you've actually been banned from Kenya since 1987 for your criticism of the government, so I suspect you won't find Sir John Johnson convincing.
No, I don't find that argument convincing. Just to put the record straight, I've not been allowed there since 1989. I think the argument that the British government is now solidly behind the democratic process in Kenya is without a great deal of foundation. The British government went along with other donors after the meeting organized by the World Bank only in November of last year, by which time there were years of solid evidence that the Kenyan government was committing gross human rights abuses on a wide scale, as well as being guilty of corruption. By that I mean detention of political critics, I mean torture on a wide scale. The other guest you have here will detail his own experiences, stifling of press freedom, appalling prison conditions. Kenya has one of the worst prisons in the world, I would say, and not only by African standards, overcrowding, denial of medical attention, especially to political detainees, and a wide range of other abuses. Britain, like many other governments, had evidence of this all along, so it's a little difficult to understand why suddenly in November 1991 Britain decided it, after all, had some evidence of this, went along with other donors.
Kariuki Gathitu, you were detained for 2 years without charge under President Moi, and I believe you were tortured while you were in prison. What happened?
Yes, I was picked from the University of Nairobi, where I was a lecturer in computer science.
When was this?
This was 1986, yes. March 1986. And I was taken to a place called Nyayo House. At the basement, there are about 14 cells which were designed for torture. And here, with many other people, I was put in a waterlogged cell for 3 weeks. And we had beatings. We stayed there without food. In fact, after my detention, I went to detention for 2 years, I did address the Detainee Review Tribunal. And I told them, if what they did to us was done to animals, the whole international world would rise against the Kenyan government.
So, John Johnson, where did British quiet diplomacy come to play in the case of Mr. Gathitu? Did you know about his case?
No, I didn't actually, but I must say it's absolutely inexcusable. And of course, that you came out in 1988. I would like to think that nothing like that could happen today. There's far more information available. There's far more public pressure. I mean, that's what we're looking at now.
But why didn't you know? And what kind of diplomacy is brought to bear in situations like this?
Well, I cannot, as I say, talk about something I didn't know about at that time. But what I could say about now is that I agree that Roger Tompkins is much more likely to be able to influence the Kenyan government by dealing with them in the normal way through government and ministers. That's what a head of mission is supposed to do. He's supposed to be accredited to a government. He's not actually supposed to be accredited to an opposition.
But I disagree there, because I think an ambassador is accredited to the country he's sent to. He's supposed to get information about the country, and he's not there simply to have quiet dialogue with the government, especially when there is evidence that that government is somehow at war with its own people, torturing, detaining, silencing criticism. I don't understand what kind of diplomacy Britain wants.
Looking ahead, Rakia Omar, I mean, are we going to get the kind of multi-party democracy that the West says that it's looking for, and aid will be restored thereafter in Kenya?
Well, I think the immediate future looks relatively bleak of specific abuses by the government, but because the lid has been on for so long, that I think it's not going to lead to a democracy as the West understands it, because I think there is just a lot of settling of scores to be done within the opposition. Unfortunately, I think the opposition seems to be relatively divided at the moment. And so I think if an election was called, I don't think it's a clear-cut case.
But there will be an election.
Well, first of all, we don't. Well, there's supposed to be an election before March 1993, and I'm assuming one will be called mainly under pressure, both internally and externally. But there will also be a lot of trouble before such an election is held.
So, John, are you confident that Britain really is doing enough? I mean, I know we have our style, but are we doing well enough in Kenya? It's a country you love.
Yes, it is a great affection for Kenya and the Kenyan people. No, I am quite convinced that we are going about this the right way. Quite frankly, what we want to see now is the Kenyans making a fair choice. One-party state, in my view, started off in Africa because it was a useful vehicle to allay ethnicity. But now it's had its day. We want to see multi-party democracy. We want to see the people of Kenya deciding in an election that is seen to be free and fair how they want to be governed.
Will we see that, Mr. Gathitu? Would you go back to Kenya now?
Yes, in fact, I'm planning to go back in the next 2 months. Not that there is quietness as far as turmoil is concerned, but it is necessary that people must go on pressurizing Moi to relinquish...
And you're confident it's not going to happen to you again?
It might happen, but not to the same extent. I'm not saying that there is freedom now today. No, there is still, for example, just 2 weeks ago, somebody was arrested for imagining the death of the president.
So it's still continuing. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there, but thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.